This is what happened when I simulated 10 more seasons on F1 23. I hope you enjoy. We start off strong as Verstappen was the winner of Season 1. He just won his third title last weekend as of making this, so we'll see if he can overtake that in this video. It was dominant from Max as he got 11 out of the 16 wins available with another 2 podiums. Norris excelled for McLaren in their first good season, grabbing his first win at Hungary, but they were nowhere near to Ferrari, who finished second. Aston have been hit pretty hard by the update, and Stroll was surprisingly out of the top 10 in the championship. Onto the driver moves, and at mid-season, Ocon was dropped by Alpine, probably for throwing up in his helmet again, with Alonso going back to the team he snaked a year before. Russell moved to Aston Martin to replace Alonso, and bloody Logan Sargent went to Mercedes and Lawson went to Williams. I don't think it'd be a surprise for you to know that Sargent scored 12 points in his half season at Mercedes as his teammate got 1 win and another 5 podiums. Good to see Sargent is as terrible in this game as he is in real life. And this was just mid-season as well, the best bits are still to come. Alonso was first to go at post-season as he retired and Pourchaire went to Alpine. Mercedes were clearly trying to destroy the team as they dropped Hamilton in favour of Piastri. No offence to Oscar Piastri, but dropping Hamilton is a crime. Elsewhere, Ocon went to Red Bull to replace Perez, who went to McLaren, and finally for Season 2, there are chassis and powertrain regulation changes. Season 2 now, and Verstappen went right to the wire with Norris in the closest title fight since 2021. 3 points separated them at the final race as Max grabbed more wins, but Norris stood on the podium in nearly every race. The difference here though was that Perez was a good teammate and came third in the championship and helped McLaren win the Constructors. Piastri needs a special mention though because he managed 209 points in his Mercedes compared to his teammates 13 and managed his first Grand Prix win in Silverstone. Due to this one driver team, Ferrari finished above Mercedes and nearly beat Red Bull. Ocon had a disaster, Stroll got destroyed by Russell, and AlphaTauri are somehow 6th in the championship. At mid-season there weren't any driver changes, but at post-season there were a few. Ocon returned to Alpine replacing Pourchaire, and Tsunoda got the call up to Red Bull. And finally, Lawson got the AlphaTauri seat from Yuki and Pourchaire went to Williams. We got a pretty close fight as McLaren are the fastest car ahead of Aston and then Red Bull. Haas are pretty quick as well and are quite close to Mercedes, so we'll see how they do next year. Finally, we got more reg changes for Season 3 as error and durability are getting a change. Season 3 now, and sorry for the standings not being as normal, but we have a new champion as Lando Norris won his first title. 11 wins and 1 race outside the top 3 summed up a dominant season as even Perez was there or thereabouts. Russell single-handedly carried Aston Martin to 4th, but it should have been 3rd as Red Bull were way off the top. Ferrari were once again 2nd as Sainz and Leclerc were pretty even in the championship. Mercedes were 5th as well, mainly due to the employment of a certain American who got 4 points. Bloody Haas scored more points than Logan Sargent as they were a solid 7th. But onto driver moves now, and the mid-season transfers have toned down since Season 1. But post-season is where it all kicked off. Strap in. Hülkenberg retired and basically ruined the entire transfer market. He was replaced by Sainz at Haas. Lawson went to Ferrari and Hauger went to AlphaTauri. Tsunoda was dropped by Red Bull and Doohan filled in, and Stroll was finally given the boot and was replaced by Ocon at Aston Martin. Pourchaire was rehired by Alpine. Hamilton went to Williams. Albon was dropped and replaced by Calderon, a first in one of these videos. Sargent was shockingly dropped by Mercedes and Sato went to the Silver Arrows. Magnussen was dropped by Haas and replaced by Drogovic, and finally Zhou was dropped and replaced at Alfa Romeo by Deruvala. There are no reg changes for next year, so with that crazy season over, let's move on to Season 4. In Season 4, it was more of the same as Lando continued where he left off. 12 wins and another year of missing out on the podium once summed up his year, and fair play to Russell because he finished ahead of Perez. Ocon was better in his new team as he got over 200 points and won the first race in Bahrain, and once again Ferrari were up there in the standings. A team that wasn't though was Mercedes as they finished 6th, but most surprising is the fall of Red Bull. Another season where Max didn't win a single race and another year of awful teammates for Piastri and Verstappen. Gasly and Pourchaire managed to bring Alpine up to 4th despite not scoring a win or a podium. Onto the driver market now, and there weren't as many moves, unsurprisingly, but still, they were pretty mad. Sato was dropped by Mercedes in favour of Drogovic, Sargent went to Haas, and Doohan was dropped by Red Bull for Tsunoda again. And at post-season, Albon moved to McLaren, Hamilton retired, and so Ocon went to Williams, and Zhou went to Aston Martin. Lawson was dropped, and Tsunoda bounced to another top team. Sato somehow ended up at Red Bull, but I guess at this point they are a midfield team, so that makes sense. Hauger went to Williams, Calderon moved to AlphaTauri, and finally Sargent was dropped for Marcus Armstrong. And there are big reg changes as chassis, powertrain and durability are all affected. On to Season 5. And it was another win for Lando as he fought a hard battle with Russell for the championship. I could get behind a McLaren Aston Martin title race, I can't lie. Russell managed more wins, and once again Lando couldn't get on the podium in every single race, but George still somehow managed to finish 13 points behind. Albon was a better teammate than Zhou, as he helped McLaren to a constructors win and got his first win in France. Verstappen may be at the lowest point of any sim we've ever done, as he's only got 32 points, and Ferrari and Red Bull are now comfortably midfield teams, which is crazy because we're only halfway through. Onto driver transfers, and there was one switch as Sato was dropped by Red Bull for Lance Stroll, but at post-season Bottas retired, which led to Tsunoda jumping ship again. Lawson went to Ferrari again. Zhou was dropped by Aston Martin after losing them the constructors, and Tarufalo was the replacement. Sato went to Alfa Romeo, and Stroll was dropped by Red Bull for Jack Doohan. There were no reg changes, and so with the R&D chart looking the same as usual, let's get into Season 6. Season 6 was a season of change, but also similar results, as McLaren and Lando both claimed another title, but this was Lando's most dominant. 13 wins and finally 16 podiums is one of our most one-sided championships yet, and Albon did well to get 2 wins off him, and Leclerc as well getting 1 is pretty impressive. Ferrari have recovered well since their midfield fight, and Alpine and Aston have fallen off. Tarufalo was unexpectedly terrible in the Aston, and they might have finished ahead of Mercedes if there was 2 drivers. Russell was very good again and nearly beat Leclerc in a good Ferrari, and Lawson was pretty good as well. But now we move to the driver market, and at post-season Verstappen called it quits after not getting a title win since Season 2. Albon went back to Red Bull after this, and Vips went to McLaren. Riccardo was dropped by AlphaTauri after 6 seasons, and Gasly went back to the sister team. Zhou went to Alpine. Lawson was dropped by Ferrari for some reason, with Vesti replacing him there. Drogovic was dropped and Vasseur replaced him. Ocon was dropped and Stroll moved back to Williams, and Armstrong was dropped in favour of Novalak. And finally, for Season 7, there were changes to the aero department. In Season 7, Norris was slowly and somehow getting better. 14 wins out of 16 is crazy, and his teammate Vips did well to steal 1 win away from him in the first race at Bahrain. Piastri and Russell once again delivered as one-man team for Mercedes and Aston. The Red Bulls were 8th and 9th, but most importantly had 2 equal drivers, and so they somehow managed 3rd in the championship. But the most important detail of this season is the free agents Ocon and also Sargent, who somehow managed to get a podium in Singapore. Well, driver transfers now, and at mid-season Vesti was dropped for Logan Sargent at Ferrari. Vips was dropped despite getting 1 win and 7 more second places, which is truly a Mercedes level decision by McLaren. Vasseur was dropped and Lawson went to Mercedes. And finally, Magnussen came out of the dead to replace Jack Doohan at Red Bull. At post-season, Gasly was dropped by AlphaTauri, with Ricciardo going back to the sister team for a 3rd stint. Stroll was dropped and Ocon went to Williams. Armstrong somehow moved to McLaren, and Magnussen was dropped by Red Bull for Iwasa. Sargent was dropped and Vips got the seat he deserved. Lawson was booted out again, and Vesti moved to Mercedes. Novalak was replaced by Cordeal, and Vasseur was preferred to Calderon at AlphaTauri. And finally, the biggest move of them all, Kalen Williams went to Williams. Finally, it's happened. There were no reg changes, and so we moved to Season 8. Is this boring now? Max used to do this, and now Lando's doing it. He got 11 wins and was way ahead of Leclerc in 2nd, and it's the same story in the constructors as McLaren won another title. Piastri did well to finish 3rd and couldn't do anything against the 2 Red Bulls in the team standings, and once again, the Red Bulls were inseparable in the drivers, which helped them finish 3rd. Iwasa actually won the first race in Bahrain. Once again, there are 2 drivers in white writing, which only means there's been some shenanigans in the driver market. Indeed, there were some changes, and we start with Vips being dropped by Ferrari for Sargent again. Cordeal was dropped and replaced at Haas by Boschung, and Armstrong was kicked out of McLaren, with them axing another driver at mid-season, replacing him with Drogovic, who managed to win in just his 2nd race for the team. Maybe most shockingly of all, Iwasa was dropped and Tatiana Calderon got the call up to Red Bull. It's Roy Nozani all over again, if you know you know. And finally, Magnussen came back from the dead again to replace Vesti at Mercedes. At postseason, after a few seasons of being dropped and then picked up by a team for half a year, Magnussen retired, and so Armstrong went to Mercedes. Ricciardo was dropped by AlphaTauri as Sainz went back to his first team. Drogovic went back to Haas as he clearly enjoyed his half season of success, and Vips went back to McLaren. Let's see if they trust the process this time. Hauger moved to Ferrari, Calderon was dropped, Fittipaldi ended up at Red Bull, Sato was dropped and replaced by Daruvala, and Vasseur went to Aston Martin, with Iwasa going down to AlphaTauri. There were power reg changes, and it's pretty equal at the top, so let's see if anyone can take down McLaren in Season 9. Well, no one could. They were more concerned with taking points off of each other, as Mercedes and Ferrari were level on points. Norris wasn't as dominant, but was still nearly 100 points clear of 2nd place Piastri. Once again, Vips got 7 podiums but managed 2 more wins, but once again, There are some drivers in white writing, which means it's time for the driver moves. Well, Vips was dropped after another great start in favour of Jack Doohan. Fittipaldi was dropped and Stroll went to Red Bull again, and Helga was dropped for none other than Daniel Ricciardo, who finally got his move to Ferrari. Armstrong was dropped and Sargent got another go at the Mercedes seat, and finally Iwasa was dropped for Jake Hughes at AlphaTauri. And in postseason, Sainz retired with Stroll going to AlphaTauri, Lawson went to Red Bull with Stroll gone, and Russell was dropped for Sargent. Our GOAT Nissany ended up getting the Mercedes seat, and Norris was dropped by McLaren for Caldwell after 7 seasons of dominance. Leclerc was also dropped by Ferrari as the top drivers were dropping out of the sport, leaving a new driver possibly able to win the championship in Season 10. There are more moves though, as Vips moved to Ferrari, Fittipaldi moved to Alfa Romeo to replace Daruvula, Boschung was replaced by Vesti at Haas, Doohan replaced Verschoor, and finally Gasly filled Doohan's seat at McLaren. Oh yeah, and there was a reserve driver who replaced Williams at Williams. For the final season there were big changes as aero, powertrain and durability were all affected. Would anyone be able to topple McLaren, and who would claim the title off of Norris in the final season of the sim? Let's find out. Pierre Gasly was our new champion, as he might have had the most dominant season in one of these videos. He got 13 wins, 16 podiums and 389 points, and was 154 ahead of second place. He very nearly won the Constructors on his own. Caldwell didn't do that badly, as he got 2 wins, with one being a 1-2 in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but he wasn't anywhere near his teammate. Oh yeah, and Sargent was pretty good and quite close to his teammate, as he helped Aston finish 3rd. So that's what happens when you simulate 10 seasons of F1 23 with upgraded McLarens, and my god were they good. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.